What, you know what, just to be safe, thing you did end up saving your ass later. I was at a sleepover as a kid. I was a little worried because my mom had been oddly tired earlier that day. I went home early because I was worried. By the end of the night 14 at the time, had to call an ambulance for my mom, as she was having problems with her heart and I was the only one there with her. She was incapable of forming coherent sentences and would probably not have gotten the help she needed if I wasn't there. So, good thing I was. Learned CPR and first aid. Had to give CPR to a family friend and she collapsed from a heart attack and thankfully she was brought back after being down for 15 minutes. She only had minor memory problems and mostly just couldn't remember that day. She's still here and kicking years later. Was delivering pizza in a sketchy block of town late at night. Huge apartment complex with multiple buildings. Walking up to the front door I noticed a couple guys wearing dark clothing about 100 foot behind me walking in my direction. Delivery was on the second floor and by the time I reached her door I heard the main door of the apartment complex open and close. She used a CC for the order and tipped in cash, so when I was putting the receipt into my bag, where I kept my cash, I actually pulled the rest of the cash out and stuffed it into my inner jacket pocket just to be safe, leaving just the change I had that night in the bag. Started to head down the stairs back out to my car and two guys jumped out from behind the stairs and the one had a gun pointed at me and told me to give them the money. I quickly handed them my bag filled with quarters and they took off towards the back entrance of the apartment complex. I never ran so fast in my life back to my car. I wanted to make sure I was as far away as possible before they realized they robbed me of $3.50 in quarters. Was on a side-by-side vehicle mudding on some property a friend and I were visiting. Mid-ride, I turn to my friend and say, "Hey, you should probably buckle your seatbelt. Just in case." Not 1 minute later did he lose control and slide front first into a tree, going about as fast as this thing could go given the conditions. Both of us were okay, but the side-by-side was completely ruined. He looked at me right after and his eyes were as big as dinner plates. I dropped my high school girlfriend off, then for some reason I locked the passenger door. Not 10 minutes later I was stopped at a red light and some scummy-looking dude tried to open up the door. I have no idea why I locked that door after she got out. I really didn't have a habit of that. No idea what would have happened if that guy got in my truck. Driving along highway and get a bad feeling with drivers ahead of me tailgating back to back at 70 miles per hour. I switch lanes to be safe and get further clearance. Not 2 seconds later one of the cars ahead slams on their brakes, looked like no fucking reason. And the cars in my previous lane slam into each other, and one car that was behind me slams into all of them full blast. Cars go flying into the air Hollywood style, flipping up nearly vertical before slamming back down. I'd probably be dead or have a lifelong disability if I hadn't moved. Avoid dumb drivers, kids, keep safe distances and buffers whenever possible. My dad lost his glasses once. He was going to just use his old prescription but last minute decided to just go to the optometrist anyway in case something changed. Turns out he had a tear in his retina and was booked for surgery within 24 hours. It was bad enough they said he probably would have gone blind really soon had they not caught it when then did. My stomach had some issues and my doctor sent me for a colonoscopy just to get things checked out. They found one polyp, no big deal, not related to the current problem, and told me to come back in 5 years just in case. I put a Google reminder and forgot about it. 5 years later, I went for the colonoscopy and they found a lot more and said I would have ended up with cancer in 5 to 20 years for sure had I not gone. Instead, they removed all polyps and now I'm regularly going to colonoscopies due to having a syndrome they identified. I'm far away from the age where you normally get a colonoscopy, so I would definitely have got cancer. When you are eligible or if it is recommended, get a colonoscopy. Not my ass, but I was getting ready for school whilst Mum was vomiting in the bathroom. She said it was just a stomach bug and to just go to school, but mentioned her arm hurt. Something didn't sit right, so I called the ambulance from downstairs. They arrived and took her into the ambulance. She then proceeded to have 3 cardiac arrests and needed defibrillated each time. A double bypass later and she was up and about within a month. Paramedics told me she would have died 5 minutes after I left, if I hadn't called. Snow chains at the bottom of the mountain. A bunch of cars passed me on a clear road on the way up with several warnings all the way up. I saw a local throwing on chains with no snow in the area. I decided to be safe and put them on. 30 minutes later I was in one of the worst snow driving conditions I've ever seen. Whiteout conditions in a snowstorm that eventually resulted in the complete shutdown of the roads. I passed car crash after car crash with just enough traction to feel somewhat comfortable moving 15 miles an hour. Anyone heading to Tahoe needs chains and chains that fit. Don't fuck around. I don't care if you have a 4-wheel drive. Driving through Tahoe and Mammoth during snowstorms is no joke. Literally sunny with no clouds to blinding white darkness in an hour. Might sound ridiculous, but many years ago when I did my mandatory community service, was a thing in Germany as a counterpart to mandatory military service. There was a particular day in a pretty harsh winter. I usually went to work with my bike, as the streets were cleared of snow and ice anyway. At this day, I didn't take my helmet off because when I arrived at the place I worked I immediately started to shovel snow and didn't even walk inside first. My workplace was a huge and old 4-story hostel in the woods. The roof was packed with snow and there were massive icicles hanging from the gutters. When a coworker asked me why I decided to look like an idiot with my helmet on, I jokingly replied it was for serious security reasons. A few moments later an icicle block fell down and hit me on the head and the shoulders. The impact was so brutal that it made me fall down on my knees. Shoulders were bruised but my head was fine. I really don't know what could have happened if I didn't wear my stupid bicycle helmet for fun that morning. Serious injury for sure. One day I was attempting to make carioca for the first time, a kind of Filipino fried mochi, and after I popped them in the oil, I settled in and watched them carefully. I never wear an apron whilst cooking, but for some reason I figured why not this time. And as soon as I stepped out of range of the fryer, they all exploded. Turns out, carioca can form an impermeable shell when fried, so pressure built up inside until they popped and sprayed hot oil all over the kitchen. Of course. I was safely away reaching for an apron and was completely dumbfounded. Made sure to punch some holes in all subsequent batches. Of course, once I cleaned the kitchen, I ate them and they were delicious. 10 out of 10, highly recommend. On a road trip with my siblings and I, Dad in Latin America, he lived there and we were visiting. On a highway at night, with clouds, no moon and no lights, this was a new highway that nobody likes taking now, as criminals often leave glass or spikes to puncture tires and rob you. Or worse. We were driving and this guy was pulled over and waving for help. My dad stopped behind and the guy was scared and asked if we could light up his car while he changed a flat tire. He was terrified of being out where alone and rightfully so. Dad goes to get out to help and my sister grabbed him and said she didn't think this felt right. Dad assured us it was fine and almost got out, but sister grabbed him again. Right then a car flew by the door right where he would have been. 4 guys jump out. One grabs the man, puts a gun to his head and the others sprint to our car. There was a brief chase down the highway, but luckily their old Corolla didn't keep up with our Jeep, and they gave up after 2 to 3 minutes of driving 170 kilometers per hour. My sister saved my dad's life, and probably ours, by making him stay in the car that extra few seconds. Was watching my toddler nephew and he'd found a metal straw somewhere in the house and started playing with it. He was just tapping stuff and waving it around, but I'd just read a story on Reddit about a woman who got completely fucked up by a metal straw when she fell and it impaled her face. So I took the metal one from nephew and gave him a soft, squishy silicone one to play with instead. I'm not exaggerating when I say less than 5 minutes later, he fell like toddlers do and I saw the silicone straw all smushed into his cheek. I had to just sit for a while after that, lol. Normally I'm pretty impressionable and cave to peer pressure, but this one time when I was younger I was hanging with my friends and a couple of older, high school guys I'd only met that day. The girls were all fawning over them but I could tell they were idiots. When they all wanted to go for a drive with the guys, I thought, nah, I don't trust these guys and I think it's best I just call my parents and go home. I got a call the next morning from one of the girls who was passenger. One of the high school boys was driving. They'd had a serious crash and one of the girls wasn't wearing her seatbelt and hit her head on the dash and was in a coma for 6 months. She was in intensive care and rehabilitation for years. Still can't believe of all the days I decided not to go with the flow, it probably saved my life. Terribly sad about my friend. We were really close but she never came right and her personality changed. I still wonder how successful she might have been and if we'd still be friends if that hadn't happened to her. Really sad. I had a female patient coming for I-131 therapy. Patient must be not pregnant and to make sure we do a blood test 1 day prior to dosing. I checked the results on screen that was negative. I printed it out and put it in the patient file, just in case, although we went paperless years earlier. After giving her radiation safety instructions and discharging her, she came a couple of days saying that she was late. The doctor inserted another pregnancy blood test and came out positive. The lab technician went to the previous negative blood test and changed it to positive. Haven't I printed the test it would look like I dosed the patient while pregnant and could get fired. Staff before this incident used to make fun of me being paranoid. After this incident everyone started printing the results. As a teenager, a friend of mine managed to lift a set of keys to a new car on a dealership lot. We were all super excited to go there that night, and take that new car for a spin. At the last moment I thought of how disappointed my mom would be, and backed out. That night, during the joyride, they got into a high-speed chase with a couple of cop cars, took an intersection at 85 miles per hour against traffic, and were spun into a brick wall after an initial collision with a garbage truck. The driver was killed, 17. And my 2 other friends suffered critical injuries and were hospitalized for weeks. No doubt in my mind that I would have been injured, or killed, as well. Worked alone in a gambling/video poker place, closing. Strange guy came in and started making small talk with me. I was expected to be kind and friendly to everybody who came in so I was doing that. I decided to send a message to my boyfriend and a friend and then something in me told me to take a picture of the guy as he moved closer to the counter I was behind. I snuck one real quick and sent it to said friend since she was awake. She called me immediately as she drove the 20 minutes to my job. An hour before I got off. I'll add, I didn't drive so I had no vehicle in the now abandoned parking lot, the only car being his which was conveniently backed in, right next to front door. 2 days later there was a missing persons report released of someone who was a very familiar build and features that I have and suspected trafficking in the area. She went missing later that same night. He left after my friend showed up. I've never had such an uneasy feeling in my life and I truly think sending those messages are what saved my life. He was waiting for me to get off work at 1 a.m., our hours were right on the front door. Lived in Baltimore at the time. Pulled up outside my place after getting off a late shift and had to get a backpack out of my trunk before going in. I noticed a group of teenaged kids hanging out on the corner and thought, nope. Called my roommate to come watch me walk to the door. About 10 minutes later a girl comes running down the street bleeding, saying she got jumped by the group of kids for no reason. Stay alert out there, y'all. Not my ass, but my mom's. She and I were home alone and I was getting ready to go to a party. I came upstairs and found her with the carbon monoxide detector in pieces on the coffee table. She said it was beeping. And apparently once years ago in our last house one was malfunctioning and giving a false alarm, so I guess she just assumed it was happening again. I shrugged it off and continued getting ready. I was about to leave but something was nagging at me. She was insisting it was fine. After some arguing with her I said, no, we are calling the fire department. So I did. They came, and the levels of carbon monoxide were so high in the basement they said anyone sleeping down there would be dead already. Our cats were vomiting from the poisoning and we didn't realize. I guess the filter on the furnace was so clogged it was pumping out carbon monoxide. One of the firefighters pulled me aside and said if I hadn't called I likely would have come home to my mom dead in her bed. Saved the GPS location of my vehicle on Google Maps before exploring a national forest with a road trip buddy. We grabbed some fishing poles and head out towards the nearest water location on our map to hopefully catch a couple fish. Turns out it was a swamp, not a lake, and we got so incredibly turned around it could have ended very badly. We really didn't go that far in from where we parked but somehow ended up on the other side of the swamp without realizing it. Drizzling rain, mosquitoes, bear tracks. And the sun started going down before we found the car. Without the GPS coordinates saved it would have been a cold wet night in the woods at a minimum, and more than likely a search and rescue required situation. Had my boat trailer bearings repacked by the boat repair shop/dealer before I went on a trip that I had to tow it for 400+ miles. I usually repacked the bearings myself but figured I'd have the pros do it since I had a long haul ahead of me. The day before I left I decided to double check that the bearing case was full of grease. Without it they would overheat and I'd be fucked royally and stranded with a high risk of a wheel actually coming off the trailer if I didn't notice it in transit. There was no grease at all in the bearing case on any of the four wheels. I would have been lucky to make it 20 miles before something serious happened. Also, this has been a habit for decades, pat my pocket to make sure my keys are in my pocket before closing the locked house door, my car door, etc. Not me but my dad. Bought into a $500K life insurance policy at 42 years old, many people made fun of him, called him crazy, etc. And he said exactly that. Just to be safe. He had a seizure at 43 years old, July 2007, brain cancer, died June 2008 at 44. Policy was paid into for less than 2 years. I've carried life insurance since I was 21. Too much cancer in my family and my dad died extremely young. When I lived at home my room was right next to the bathroom, and when someone had to use it, I would always wake up, because I'm a light sleeper. The hall has sensors for the light and the click sound would usually wake me up. Else the noise from the loud bathroom fan usually did the trick. I'm always a bit paranoid and if I hear a sound or anything, my mind always jumps to the worst possible scenario. Anyway. This night I didn't hear anything, beside a bump, not like dropping something on the floor bump. But more like kicking the floor with your heel bump. I laid in bed thinking it was probably nothing, while my mind was going 100 miles per hour, thinking about all the scenarios that could have made the bump. I laid in bed for around 2 minutes. When I agreed upon myself that I wouldn't let the sound slide, even though there was dead silent after that. There were no fan noise coming from the bathroom, or no light in the hallway. I decided to leave my room and check just to be sure. The bathroom light and everything was off. But the door to the bathroom was halfway open. I opened the door all the way, and it turned out to be that the bump was my mom hitting the bathroom floor with her head, as one of her veins in her brain had popped and she had a brain hemorrhage. Doctors later told me that I was the reason she was still with us today, as it was a severe brain hemorrhage. I lock my doors habitually. Walk through a door, reach behind me, twist the lock. It's the way I was raised, and I honestly don't even think about it. I've actually gotten myself into trouble absent-mindedly locking other people's doors, house, offices, shops. I'm a menace. This one night, I'm sitting and reading pretty late, and I suddenly think, I need to check my front door to make sure it's locked. Lo and behold, it's actually unlocked. Shocked me a bit, but I locked the door and the deadbolt and slid the chain for good measure. Then go get myself a glass of water. As I'm walking with my glass of water from the kitchen back past my front door, I catch a movement out of the corner of my eye. I turn to the door and watch the doorknob slowly try to turn left and right. The murky movements that a locked doorknob can be forced when twisted. I put on as deep of a voice as I can and forcefully stage project, I have a gun, and I'm calling the cops. The doorknob stopped turning. I slept in a closet that night. Just in case. I had a lump on my cheek right above where the jawbone connects to the skull. Asked my doctor about it, he said it was fine since it was moving but maybe go to the dermatologist. Dermatologist said it's fine because it is moving. It probably a cyst and I could have it removed if I don't like how it looks. Got a referral to a head and neck surgeon and he immediately felt it and said, "Nah, that's not a cyst, let's do a biopsy." Turns out it was a pleiotropic adenoma in my salivary gland. Vanity saved me. My friend and his wife were having their first child. They had gotten a big packet of information and paperwork to fill out before the due date to make things easier. There were also brochures for genetic testing and other things that could be done. And one of the things was about saving the cord blood. My friend said that he looked at the front of the brochure and his wife asked if they should do it. It is not cheap, a couple $1,000s to save it and a few hundred a year after that. And my friend said, yes. Their daughter was born later that year. 3 years after her birth, they had a boy, and he was born with an immune disorder, no white cells, and his big sister's cord blood and stem cells were used as a treatment. When I was a student I'd do my own work on my car to save mechanic bills. One day, after changing brake pads, I was driving on the motorway at 100 km/h, the freeway at 60 miles per hour for our American friends, and felt a slight shuddering through the steering wheel. Given you're not supposed to stop on a motorway unless it's a real emergency, I was reluctant to pull over to check if anything was wrong. Though having only worked on the car that morning, I decided I'd check, just to be safe. Turns out I hadn't even finger-tightened the wheel nuts. Only threaded them about a half turn each. When I bought a used car while traveling around, my dad pressured me into buying a towing insurance. I thought it was a waste of money for $60. I ended up getting towed 6 times in 2 months when my car broke down. I saved about $2,000 with having that insurance. I was an expediter at a restaurant. It was super busy and I was trying to get runners for food. Was about to send out a stack of dim sum when I looked at the ticket again with a note that said, "No peanuts on the tempura tofu." I had read it earlier and didn't sprinkle peanuts on it. Another server was about to run it to the table when I told him to wait and get the actual server for the table. We were slammed and he was kinda pissed but went and got him. The actual server comes back and he's all frustrated when I ask him, "Does your no peanuts guy not like peanuts or is he allergic to them?" Server responds with, "He's very allergic to them, that's why I put no peanuts on the ticket." He was all being shitty with me. I told him, well, the fucking tempura tofu is fried in fucking peanut oil. Didn't realize the head chef was behind me and heard the whole thing. Server didn't know we only used peanut oil. It was an Asian fusion, really nice upscale restaurant. Needless to say, the head chef, fucking reamed this guy. I was a half second from sending that food out too. Would have been bad. Was about to put a new load of laundry into my washing machine in the dark, saw what looked to be a large sock still in the washing machine. Put my hand halfway into the washing machine, then pulled my hand back up and thought, I usually don't leave things in my washing machine. Turned on the light, and it was a bat sitting in there. When I was like 5 years old, my parents took my sister and me to a planetarium show, and every kid got a souvenir pencil that had the distances of the planets from the sun written on it: Mercury, Venus, Earth, etc. The guy running the planetarium show said something like, hang on to these pencils until 7th grade, kids, and you can use them to cheat on your astronomy tests. He was joking, but I never forgot, and sure enough, it was the exact pencil I used to cheat on astronomy in 7th grade. I felt smart but also bad because I didn't feel good cheating and, almost, never cheated after that. I had a car sitting on jack stands because I needed to do some transmission work. Before climbing under it, I thought it'd be a good idea to rock the car around. One of the jack stands was not in the right spot and the car slipped off it, slamming down on the front disc brakes. Would have killed me. This is from 30 years ago, so some details may be different these days. After enlisting in the Army, recruits get a list of everything they must bring to boot camp. On this list was a padlock. During processing, the 5 or so days before the real training starts, recruits are given their military equipment including duffel bags and told to put their things they brought with them in the duffel bag. After finally getting everything in, I was left with just the padlock. I had no idea what to do with it. But I noticed if I closed my duffel bag in a certain way, I could close the lock on the hook. So when we get to the training unit and off the cattle trucks, and a few hundred drill sergeants are yelling and screaming and telling us to line up, which we do, with our duffel bags in front of us. The drill sergeants then proceed to check if the bags are locked, and if not, they grab them at the bottom and whirl them around, flinging the entire contents on the ground. Everyone in the entire company had their stuff dumped except for me and one other guy. Only because locking my duffel bag was the only thing I thought of doing. Putting it in my pocket was not an option because they were very clear about not having any civilian items in our uniform pockets. I was going on a road trip. We packed everything in the trunk. Then I realized that I forgot to check the air in the spare tire. Faced with unpacking and repacking, I thought, what are the odds? We've had the car for years, never had a flat, we probably won't have a flat now. Then I thought, screw that, and tossed the floor pump I use for my bicycle into the trunk, just in case. Got a flat in the middle of fucking nowhere. Spare was too flat to drive on. Floor pump saved my ass. It gets packed on every trip now. Saved an email where a lead developer told me to do something stupid. A couple years later, him now a manager who liked to yell at his subordinates, we were talking about this stupid behavior and he yelled, well, why did you do that? I pulled up his email. Clearly instructing me to do just that. He sputtered and walked off, speechless. This guy is one of the reasons I still have trust issues with management, even after a string of really competent, caring, trustworthy managers. I bought a used Subaru Baja that was 5 years old at the time and had 75,000 miles for $12,000. The salesman offered an extended warranty that covered the engine for $2,500, would last 3 years/36,000 miles. That was kind of a lot, and I usually don't buy those. I don't know what got into me that day. But I said sure. 1 month and 750 miles later, after an oil change at a mechanic shop, oil started shooting into the pistons. I'm not good with cars, oil went where it wasn't supposed to go. Completely ruined the engine and turbo. The dealer had to keep it for 3 weeks. The warranty company flew someone out to inspect the car, and eventually approved a replacement engine, turbo, and any other affected parts. Total repairs cost almost $11,000, and the warranty then applied to all the new parts too. Car drove like it was brand new. Later discovered the car had 5 previous owners before me, but I couldn't find any accident or serious repair history. This is probably the only time buying an extended warranty on something actually worked out in my favor. I bought a really nice tablet a few years ago, a Wacom Intuo Cintiq, essentially a drawing tablet built into a laptop, for animation and the like. Sometimes when you buy nice things they come in nice boxes, and for some reason I don't really want to throw this box away immediately. I put it in the storage area of my basement and forgot about it. After only about a month this $2,500 tablet stopped working. It wasn't dropped or damaged, and I'm still not sure how it broke. It would simply try to boot up and fail, crashing and demanding a restart. I called support, and after several calls and many hours, we were unable to resolve the issue. They said I could send it back and get a new one if it wasn't physically damaged. They told me it needed to be sent back in the original box. I now keep boxes for everything I buy until the warranty expires. TLDR, cardboard box saved me from wasting $2,500 on a plastic brick. Was remodeling my house, took out a loan and had to get the house appraised to get the loan. Found that my house was worth $100K more than I had it insured for. Raised my limits on the home insurance to $50K more than the appraised value in anticipation of completing renovations. 2 weeks later, house burned to the ground due to a faulty bathroom fan that I did not touch. City, insurance company and loan company all sent separate investigators due to how shady it looked. Couple of years ago I restarted The Sopranos from season 1. I think it's in the first season where the water heater leaks and floods Tony's basement. So there are these scenes where he's waiting around in a flooded basement. I was imagining what a nightmare that would be. It reminded me that when I bought my house, the inspector told me I would need to replace the water heater within 5 years. I then realized that was like 12 years prior, so I suddenly got nervous. I went and looked at the water heater, and it seemed fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I also did not have the money to pay to have a new water heater installed. So, I decided to go ahead and buy a new water heater and then save up money to pay someone to install it. The water heater arrived and I stored it in the laundry room. Just a few weeks after it arrived, I happened to look at the old water heater, and I noticed the catch pan under it had an inch of water in it. It was leaking. Oh no! Emergency! Except wait a minute, I already have a plan for this. So, instead of saving up money to hire a plumber, I went to YouTube and learned how to install my own water heater. It all worked out perfectly. All because The Sopranos made me anxious about the condition of my water heater, causing me to randomly purchase a water heater I had no immediate plan to install. Went hiking in the middle of the day with a friend and his GF. I brought flashlights for each of us. Well, the hike took a lot longer than expected and my buddy's GF sprained her foot at the end. It took us nearly 3 times as long to get back and it was dark with relatively rocky terrain. Those flashlights saved our bacon. I can't even fathom how long it would take to stumbling in the dark otherwise. I had originally booked a rental car for a trip to Iceland using my credit card points. 2 days before, I cancelled and booked it with my credit card, which provides rental vehicle coverage, because it looked like the weather wasn't going to be great while we were there and I wanted the extra protection. While there, we got into an accident for which we were not at fault. The car was almost a total loss and I had to pay $12,000 plus out of pocket to the company. It took a few months and a ton of paperwork, but the credit card company refunded all of it. I still think about how so lucky it was that I changed the booking. I would have been ruined for a very long time otherwise. I used to be a banner tow pilot, and was often tasked to fly banners over NYC area, especially over the Hudson River. I would pick them up at an airport in NJ and make my way over from there. Typically, if you were to run into some kind of engine problem, you have a fair number of places you could theoretically land if you had engine trouble. Not so much over the NYC metro area. So I picked out a trail of breadcrumbs, if you will, of specific places I could try to land my plane if I ever had to. On the 1-year anniversary of the miracle on the Hudson, Captain Sullenberger, etc., I was given the job to fly a banner over a boat on the Hudson that would be carrying the crew and some passengers from the flight. On the way there, my engine failed while I was less than 1,000 feet above the ground. Sinking quickly, I needed to find a place to land right away. Fortunately, my best previously selected spot was just to my left, a landfill on Staten Island, and I put the plane right on the top of it. My friends and I were always giving shit to another friend because he was never wearing the seatbelt while driving. One night another friend and him drove me home. It was pretty late and we were all tired. When they dropped me off I told him, "Use the fucking seatbelt, you dumbass." The next day, around lunchtime, I got a call that my 2 friends got in a car accident. The dumbass fell asleep while driving my other dumbass friend's car. They hit a parked car, which hit the car in front of it and got stuck into a wall. The parked car acted as a ramp for their car. They flipped over and slid like 20 meters upside down. For some reason the dumbass had his seatbelt on for the first time ever and he didn't get injured. Both of them crawled outside the car without a single scratch. If I'm not wrong, my friend in the passenger seat broke his pinky though. Dumbass learned his lesson and his seatbelt is always on now, even when he's in the passenger seat. I was offered a job in Europe, where I was promised a bonus that was X% of my salary, paid twice a year. When the offer was sent, there was no mention of the bonus, and when I questioned why, I was told, "Don't worry. It's in this email with my official company signature." I put that one into the saved folder, just to be safe. Fast forward to moving. On the first payout period I was told I needed to be with the company for 90 days first before a bonus would be paid. Okay, I was annoyed. But I guess that makes sense. On the second bonus payment, they mentioned that the company hadn't had a great year and nobody would be getting bonuses. More annoyed, but if the company isn't doing great, what are you going to do? I should add this was in 2008. The following year rolls around and the company announces that things have really taken off and they will pay out the previous bonus period, in addition to the current bonus period. Only problem is, I literally handed in my resignation that day. I inquire to find out if I'll be receiving my bonus from the previous bonus period, and they say, "Are you kidding? You just quit." I call a lawyer. I dig up the email from the start of this post, hand that over, and the lawyer says it's a slam dunk case. She goes after both bonus payments from the first year, and both bonus payments from the current year, even though one of them hasn't happened yet. Company HQ calls me and tries to get me to drop it, and I refer them to my lawyer. A week later, at my new job, the lawyer informs me that they've paid all 4 bonus payments, and she also went after her own fees, so it cost me nothing. Glad I saved that email. Cover your ass, and do not let others push you around. I was undergoing pilot training and was pretty new to the whole thing, feeling the pressure to perform, etc. I walked out to pre-flight a plane for a solo flight. You do this completely alone. Instructor was back at flying school doing something else. After doing my walk around, it's time to check the oil. Cessna 172s have a dipstick that is attached to a cap that screws into the engine. You unscrew cap and remove dipstick along with it and check the oil. Except, after I unscrew the cap there doesn't seem to be a dipstick attached to it. I have this thought, well, the engine is still warm from the dudes who just flew before me, so they flew it like this. Maybe they had a separate dipstick? They must have checked the oil then some other way. Then I have the, well, to be safe. I should actually pack this up and go ask someone at the flight school exactly how to check the oil in this case. Note, this takes quite a chunk of time out of my supposed flight and will cut my lesson for the day short by quite a margin, but I do it anyway. Long story short, info gleaned from subsequent investigations: the dipstick had broken off during the previous flight, that had landed just minutes before, and had slid straight into the engine, where the crankcase had been chomping away metal from the tip. That metal now circulating in the engine. The aircraft was grounded, it was extremely dangerous to fly, and at massive cost had to be stripped down, the entire engine disassembled. And they actually had to find every bit of metal missing from the dipstick and reassemble the dipstick before plane could be reassembled and made flight-worthy again. If, in a moment of stupidity, I'd taken off in that plane, I'd probably be dead. Many years ago when I was a tech at a call center, I was on a call with the client's IT guy to fix a corrupted database. Their IT guy shared screens with me so that I could work on the recovery. The IT guy renamed the files as fucked_db, fucked_backup_db, etc. Just to be safe. I had him say that it was he who named the files as such and not me. I asked him to confirm this each time I had to touch the files. I took screenshots also. Little did I know, this call was monitored, voice and screen recording. A day later, I got called in by a manager asking me to explain a situation that came out of a recent call I was on. He had only seen a few screenshots that were made by the recording program. I told him to watch the whole video with the synced audio. A few hours later, he called me into his office to apologize for speaking to me with such an accusatory tone. Moral of the story: always cover your ass. On the brighter side, after the incident, this manager was always super nice to me and backed me up whenever there was an issue. He even wrote me a rave review/recommendation on LinkedIn, back when LinkedIn actually got you jobs. I went shopping to prep for my long-distance girlfriend that was staying over and I saw boxes of baking soda in the market. I thought, oh yeah, it's smart to keep baking soda around in the kitchen in case you have a grease fire. So I grab a box. She's cooking breakfast the next morning while I'm in the shower when I hear her yelling for me. I come out and the stove is on fire. Like a champ I yell, I'm ready for this, and grab the baking soda and put out the fire. Always keep baking soda in the fridge, kids. Got insurance for a moving van. It was $50, and I thought, just in case. Turns out my roommate wasn't paying attention, and caused one of the walls to be ripped up. Would have cost near $3,000 in damages, but since I paid the $50, I didn't owe anything. We recently went driving around Wales and always use Google Maps for navigation. Last week, the O2 network went down for most of the day, while we were smack in the middle of nowhere, which would have made searching for destinations impossible. But I had the forethought that even with a perfectly working cellular network, Wales is full of countryside, so signal may be lost a lot, so I pre-downloaded the entire northern half of Wales onto my phone before we set off so a data connection wasn't required to navigate. I think we'd still be driving now if I didn't do that. We've reached the end of the video once again. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to get notified whenever my next video drops, make sure to subscribe. I'm posting once or twice a week. Also let me know your thoughts on the stories. Until next time.